All right, so this is week 14, and this week you do have test number 4. And so just a reminder, the study guide for test number 4 is here. When you go to the home page, so remember the home page is here. So here's a study guide for test 4. And so when you go, so there's like 4 different things you need to look at. So there's problem set 4 right here. You click on that, and I asked you to look at problems 38, 39, 42 through 47. And then when you click on problem set 5, I think you have to look at all the problems. And then problem set 6 is where I'm telling you which worksheets to look at for the compound interest formulas and some other concepts. So when you go to it, so let's go and go to this. So for example, the first one, we talked about this in the last class period as well. Um, so here are the keys to the problems in the study guide. And I asked you to look at 38, 39, 42, 44 through 47. So when you start at 38, that's the one where you're asked to determine the functions even, odd, or neither. So you're given a graph, you're given an algebraic function. So remember to do that, make sure you see it says show work. So make sure you look at those. See, there's a worksheet that went with it that you need to look at. But the key to those problems are also located here. But that's where you have to use f of negative x. So remember, one thing I'm going to be looking at for this type of problem here is if you are finding f of negative x and then comparing that with the function. All right, so just make sure you're looking at that. And then make sure you're looking at the rest of these problems, 42, 44 through 47. And so if you look at 44 through 47, that's where you had the algebra functions. So you subtracted functions, you multiplied, you added, and then I think you also had composition. So make sure you know how to deal with composition with an open circle. That's composition. That does not mean multiplication. So you'll have a problem on a test with a table just like 47. Okay. So that was that one. And let's go to the other study guide. So this says study all problems, problem set 5. So let's look at that. Um, Actually, it says problem 53 is not on the test. So, but everything else is. So make sure you're looking at all these other problems. So that's the one where you dealt with inverse functions, one-to-one functions. You had to find the domain of certain functions. That's where we talked about the end behavior of certain functions. And then the last class period, remember last week, that's where we talked about solving exponential equations. And that's where we talked about in these problems here, you had to get the bases to be the same. The keys are posted. I did ask you to look at worksheet 5.4, worksheet 1. The key for that worksheet will be posted tomorrow. No, Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning. You have until tomorrow to work on that worksheet for the worksheets for this week. Problem number 53 is not on this test, but there's always one on the final exam. So make sure. Now this I believe we is not graded or maybe graded next week. I can't remember, but make sure. No, actually, it had to be turned in this week. That's right. So it is turned in this week because some of you already turned it in. Don't forget, though, it is telling you to indicate the horizontal asymptote and to graph it. So you will have to graph the horizontal asymptote on on the um, on the final exam. All right, but for test number 4, 53 is not on it. Then the other thing I asked you to look at was the next problem set right here, problem set 6. And that's where you, number 1, you had the interest worksheet. So worksheet 1, 2, and 3 from section 5.1. I will give you the formula. So those 2 formulas I'll give to you. Just make sure you know how to use your calculator. And I will ask you to show the setups. So the setup is half your points. Your final answer is half your points. All right. So just make sure you show the setup. Otherwise, you'll only get half your points. And then number 2, given a polynomial, determine the degree, the maximum number of x-intercepts, the maximum number of turning points. So that's worksheet 5 for section 4.2. All right, and then there's right here, this is the test 4 from last semester, but notice that when you go to it, there's some extra problems here that went on test 4 from last semester. So if all you're doing is studying test 4 from last semester, you're going to be missing a few problems on this semester's test. So be careful. Make sure you're looking at problem set 4, problem set 5, problem set 6. Okay? All right, so then for Noon Alta assignment, section 3.4 and the right here, let me go ahead and do this. Problem set 4 right here, and then right here, operations on polynomials. I've extended this several times, and only 2 people have worked on it. So this is it. Tonight is it. The deadline is April 23rd. That's the absolute deadline for completing 3.4 and operations and polynomials. Um, there's just not those of you that didn't get 100, and most of you did, but there's some of you that still did not, and it just seems that at this point you're not working on it. So that's it. So after tonight, these are gone, and you're going to have to now work on these. So notice there's an absolute deadline of May 1st for 3.5, May 1st for 4.2, and then here's an other absolute deadline of simplifying radicals on May 1st. Okay, these are section 5.1, 5.2 are due April 30th. Those are not the absolute deadlines. That's just when the scores will be sent to Canvas. None of you have got 100% on 5.1 and 5.2 yet. So I don't know if you've started working on it, but none of you have gotten 100% yet. I'm hoping that's going to change this week, but the scores will be sent to Canvas on April 30th for both of those, but you'll have some extra time to improve your score before classes end at the end of week 15. Okay, all right, and then let's go to the agenda. Let's see, the agenda. All right, so week 15, week 14 actually. So let's go to week 14. Oops. All right, week 14. So week 14, the section 4.3 that you see here, that was right here. That was to be done last week. So remember, we just never got to it. So rather than having you do this last week, I just went ahead and have you do it this week. Now, this this part of section 4.3 here you see on Monday, that is long division. And both of those are non-graded. Last week, if you recall, the worksheet 2 is graded. I went ahead and I changed it to non-graded. So both of those are non-graded. All right, so then we go to Thursday. Let me go ahead and move this up. When you go to Thursday, right here, we're still dealing with section 4.3, except now we're talking about synthetic division and the remainder theorem. On your final exam, there's always a question on using synthetic division and a question on the remainder theorem. So both of those are graded. It is very important that you look at the lessons here that goes with those 2 worksheets. So when you click on this lesson, so notice there's a lesson here on synthetic division. All right, and when you go to this one here, part C right here, that's the one of remainder theorem. There's a lesson there on how to use the remainder theorem to evaluate polynomial functions. All right, so make sure you understand the synthetic division and you understand the remainder theorem. And then the next thing I need for you to do to work on this week by yourself will be section 5.3, properties of logarithms. Before you do these, now there are 4 worksheets here. 3 are graded, 1's not graded. Use the non-graded. The non-graded may help you, or it should help you rather, with some of the problems that are in worksheets 1 and 2. So 1, 2, and 3 talks about expanding logarithms. 4 talks about condensing logarithms. And before you do all these 4 worksheets, make sure you study the lessons that are in A, B, and C. It is very important that you study those. So here's A. So there's one lesson there, and it talks about the base change formula. So remember last week we looked at a logarithm and we saw that we could not use the calculator? Because the only time you can use the calculator, remember, is when you're base 10 or base E, LOG or LN. We had a problem, we discussed a problem where the base was something like, let's say, 5. You can't use your calculator unless you use the base change formula. And so that's what this is. So some of the problems in here will ask you about the base change formula, and then you're going to talk about the product rule, the quotient rule, and the power rule. All those are on the final exam. So when you look at the notes that go with this, here are the notes. So notice here's the base change formula. Your your uh, you're given 2 examples here. So the log of 7 base 3, log of 8 base 2. And so it's very easy how to do this. And then you're told about the product rule, the quotient rule, some base change formula again, some more of those problems, and then your properties of logarithms, some more problems dealing with properties of logarithms. And then you go to the next one, part B, and then you look at the notes that go with that. Now again, this is still dealing with expanding, using those properties, except the problems are a little bit more difficult than in part A. So when you open B, again, I gave you the properties here, and I'll give you the properties on the final exam. So I'll give you those properties, but you have to know how to use them. And so here are the examples that go with those properties. So make sure you're looking at the video. Remember, there's a video that goes with this, so make sure you're looking at the video so you'll hear the words. And so there's those examples that you need to be aware of. Then you go to lesson C, and same thing here. Now this is one in condensing, so that's going to go with part C. I'm sorry, with worksheet 4. So this is it still deals with the product rule, quotient rule, power rule, except, and notice the rules again here, except when you're condensing, you're kind of going the other way. So you're going from a multiple logarithms to a single logarithm. See the one in the little box? So for example, you went from natural log x plus the natural log of 3 is the same thing when condensed as the natural log of, in parentheses, 3 times x. 2 times the log of x plus 4 base 2, condensed is log of x plus 4 squared base 2. And so you're going to learn this. Make sure you look at the video. The video explains this. You do this by using these properties of logarithms here. The product rule, quotient rule, and then the power rule. Okay, so I believe that is it for this week. So this is week 14. So when you go to the table, notice that here's week 14. These are the non-graded worksheets. The keys are already posted. Here are the graded worksheets. The keys are not posted, so you won't be able to get access to this until next week. And notice we have 1 week left. So week 15 will be our last week, and then the week after that, week 16, is your final exam week. And your final exam will be on Wednesday, May 10th at 6 p.m. All right, so that's it. So I will see you on Wednesday. Make sure you bring your calculator on Wednesday and you know how to use your calculator on those logarithms. I'm sorry, not the logarithms, but the interest formulas. Those 2 problems on the interest formulas. So make sure you you bring your calculator. If you forget your calculator, I'm not going to have an extra one. So all you'll be able to get on that test, if you forget your calculator, you'll be able to set up the problem. You'll get 5 points, but you'll lose another 5 points because you never worked out the problem. All right. So bring your calculator and know how to use your calculator. Remember, you cannot use your cell phone calculator. And you cannot use a graphing calculator. BRCC says that you only allowed to use a scientific calculator. Okay, that's it. I will see you on Wednesday.